June Harrow first heard the station while driving home across Weller County, a place of empty farms and radio towers abandoned after the mills closed. At exactly 1:07 in the morning, every station dissolved into static. The dial moved by itself to 107.7, a frequency that had been silent for 20 years. A calm announcer welcomed the only listener and read tomorrow's weather. Then he gave lottery numbers and warned that the East Bridge would close at noon after a tanker overturned. The broadcast ended at 1:14. When June reached home, the radio returned to normal and the station vanished from the dial. By afternoon, every detail had come true. Rain began at 9:20 despite a clear forecast. The lottery numbers matched. At 12:03, a tanker overturned on the East Bridge, closing it exactly as the voice had said. June searched old records for 107.7 and found WDLR, a local station destroyed when its transmission tower collapsed during a storm in 2006. The final broadcast had ended at 1:14 a.m. The announcer, Filez, disappeared in the collapse and was never found. A newspaper photograph showed the station's control room. On the wall behind Filez was a clock frozen at 1:07. June traced older WDLR predictions through newspaper archives. The station had warned about fires, wrecks, floods, and disappearances for years before it closed. Each report contained one detail the public version omitted: the name of a witness who later vanished. Families described the same pattern. Their missing relatives had driven alone, heard a dead frequency, and become obsessed with preventing an event. Some succeeded, but a different tragedy followed nearby. June marked every case on a map. The points formed a widening circle around the WDLR tower. Her father's workshop sat at its center. The newest point was the road where June had heard the broadcast. June returned to the same road the next night with a digital recorder on the passenger seat. At 1:07, the radio woke and delivered 7 more minutes from the next day. A school closure, a house fire, the discovery of a missing dog beside County Road 6. June recorded every word. At home, the file contained only static. Beneath it, she heard a faint tapping, 3 quick, 2 slow, 3 quick. Her father had used that rhythm when knocking on her bedroom door. He had vanished 16 years earlier while repairing electrical equipment near the abandoned WDLR tower. June found the missing dog exactly where the bulletin promised, tied beneath an abandoned rail bridge. The animal refused to approach until she switched off her car radio. When she brought it home, the owner cried with relief. At that same moment, a house 2 streets away caught fire after an overloaded space heater failed. No one was injured, but the address matched a location the announcer had started to read before June interrupted the broadcast. The dog stared toward her parked car and growled. From behind the dark dashboard came 3 quick taps, 2 slow, then 3 quick. June had saved what the station named and exposed what it had left unsaid. On the third night, the announcer stopped reading and addressed June by name. He said the station was accepting 1 call from its only listener. Her phone rang before the invitation ended. The number displayed was her father's old workshop line, disconnected since his disappearance. June answered and heard wind, metal cables, and her father struggling to breathe. He warned her not to believe the forecasts. The station did not predict tomorrow, he said. It selected one possible tomorrow and made the listener remember it. Attention was the mechanism. Belief was the transmitter. Before June could ask where he was, Filez thanked the caller and disconnected them. A telephone technician named Owen traced the call from June's father's workshop number. The signal had entered the network through pay phones removed years earlier, then crossed emergency lines, farm fences, and a weather sensor attached to the WDLR tower. Each connection showed a timestamp 7 minutes later than the one before it. Owen played the recorded trace and heard June's side of a conversation she had not yet had. In it, she begged him to disconnect the county exchange. He refused, saying thousands of calls would fail. The recording ended with a crash. The following afternoon, Owen's service truck was found empty beside the Tower Road, its radio tuned to 107.7. June broke into the county archive and found WDLR's surviving tapes. Official recordings ended in 2006, but boxes continued through the present year. Each tape held 7 minutes of future news, followed by the name of one local listener. Many names belonged to people killed the following day. Others had disappeared. Her father's name appeared on a reel dated the night he vanished. The recording described a tower collapse that never happened in public records. At the end, her father refused to read a final bulletin. Filez told him that another listener would eventually finish the broadcast. Then June heard her own childhood voice asking when he would come home. Hidden inside the tape box was her father's repair notebook. Most pages contained voltage readings and hand-drawn circuits, but the final section listed rules. Never answer after the fourth bulletin. Never repeat a name spoken on air. Never listen inside a room with more than one clock. A final note warned that silence did not stop the transmission. It made the listener supply the missing details. June remembered nights after her father vanished when every clock in their house had disagreed by 7 minutes. On the last page, he had written her name again and again, then crossed it out until the paper tore. Beneath the whole was one sentence: "Filez needs her to believe I am still alive." That night the broadcast began with ordinary items, then shifted to breaking news. Filez announced that local woman June Harrow would be found dead beside the abandoned transmission tower at 1:14 a.m. The cause was listed as electrical trauma. In the background, June heard herself begging someone to shut off the microphone. Filez repeated the exact clothes she was wearing and described the recorder on her passenger seat. June pulled onto the shoulder and threw the radio fuse into the road. The voice continued through her phone, the dashboard chime, and the tiny speaker inside the recorder. 7 minutes later, every device went silent. June tested whether the future could be changed. The next bulletin predicted that a boy would be struck outside a grocery store at 4:10. She arrived early, found him, and kept him inside. At 4:10, a delivery truck swerved to avoid the empty crosswalk and crashed through the store window. The boy survived, but the driver died. The station had not lied. It had rearranged the cost. June understood her father's warning. Each act of resistance forced the selected tomorrow to correct itself. Saving one person did not erase the event. It moved the damage somewhere the listener had not been told to watch. June locked her radio in a metal toolbox and spent the next night in a silent basement. At 1:07, the furnace clicked in the rhythm of the announcer's voice. Water pipes carried tomorrow's weather through the walls. The refrigerator motor hummed the lottery numbers. When she covered her ears, words appeared in the condensation on a window. Filez announced that refusal counted as participation because the listener imagined what she was missing. June tried thinking of several futures at once, but each possibility collapsed toward the same image: the WDLR tower under lightning and her father waiting beneath it. At 1:14, the toolbox opened from the inside. June found WDLR's retired engineer, Mara Quill, living outside the county with every radio removed from her house. Mara explained that the tower had been built above an experimental military relay. During certain storms, the equipment received signals before they were transmitted. WDLR learned to broadcast 7 minutes from 24 hours ahead. Management used it for weather and traffic until the signal began choosing listeners. Filez became obsessed with preventing tragedies. Every correction caused another. Eventually, he decided the only stable future was one narrated without interruption. Mara believed Filez had died long ago, but his voice remained inside the feedback loop, reading tomorrow forever. Mara showed June Filez's private files. He had begun as a careful local reporter, beloved for staying on air during storms. After the relay received its first future signal, he prevented a school bus accident by broadcasting a warning. The bus changed routes and struck another vehicle. Filez spent years searching for a prediction without displaced harm. His notes grew frantic, then devotional. He concluded that tragedy came from uncertainty itself, and that a perfectly narrated future would eliminate suffering by eliminating choice. In the final photograph, Filez stood beside the transmitter with copper burns around his mouth. On the back he had written, "Tomorrow only hurts while people believe it can change." Mara gave June one final tape recorded by her father. He had entered the tower intending to destroy the transmitter. Inside, he discovered hundreds of radios tuned to 107.7 and a microphone connected to none of them. Filez offered him a bargain: read the bulletins and June would never appear in one. Her father agreed, becoming the tapping voice beneath the static. For 16 years, he had steered forecasts away from her. Now the loop was weakening, and Filez needed a new announcer. June's death bulletin was not a prediction. It was leverage designed to bring her to the tower and force her father to surrender the microphone. At 1:06 the next morning, June drove toward WDLR with Mara beside her. Radios activated in dark houses as they passed. Car stereos lit in empty vehicles. Store alarms spoke in Filez's voice. He announced the weather, then began counting down the final minute of June's life. Mara carried bolt cutters and an analog field meter. The needle pointed not toward the tower but toward June. The future signal had attached itself to its listener. Destroying the transmitter might no longer matter. At the base of the tower, hundreds of discarded radios formed a circle, each playing June's breathing 1 second before she breathed. As June approached the tower, Weller County slipped out of sequence. Traffic lights changed before cars reached them. A diner waitress dropped a cup, heard it shatter through the radio, then watched it fall from her hand. People woke remembering conversations scheduled for the next morning. Every public clock jumped from 1:07 to 1:14, while June's dashboard continued counting the missing minutes 1 second at a time. Mara warned that the broadcast was expanding beyond a single listener. If the loop closed around the county, everyone inside would remember the same future and make it unavoidable. Behind them, headlights turned toward the tower as sleeping drivers followed instructions they had not yet heard. There was no station building, only a microphone hanging from a cable beneath the tower. A red on air sign glowed above it. June's father stood inside the circle, unchanged from the night he disappeared. He could not step beyond the radios. Every time he tried, the speakers replayed the moment he agreed to Filez's bargain and returned him to the microphone. He told June the loop needed a listener, an announcer, and a death the listener believed was unavoidable. If she refused the role, the bulletin would complete itself. If she accepted, her father could leave, but June would become the voice selecting tomorrow for someone else. The countdown reached 30 seconds. June stepped to the microphone and began reading the bulletin exactly as written. She gave her name, the location, and the time. Then she changed one sentence. Instead of saying she had been found dead, she said a recording bearing her voice had been found. The radios hesitated. The future tried to correct itself, flashing images of June collapsing, Mara screaming, and the tower burning. June kept speaking. She described the body as a broadcast artifact with no physical remains. At 1:14, the tower discharged a blue arc into the ground. June remained standing. Her father fell across the circle's boundary. June's altered sentence split the broadcast into competing versions. One radio reported her death. Another announced her disappearance. A third said she had never entered Weller County. The speakers argued in Filez's identical voice, each trying to become the version June believed. Her father shouted for her to leave, but every direction away from the tower appeared to end with someone else dying. Mara realized the relay was searching for consensus. She tuned the radios a fraction apart, filling the circle with incompatible tomorrows. For the first time, Filez sounded afraid. He ordered June to choose one account before uncertainty escaped the transmission and infected every memory in the county. For a moment, the station went silent. Then police scanners across the radios reported a fire moving through Weller County. The future had accepted June's survival and shifted the promised death outward. Mara watched the field meter climb. Hundreds of possible victims flickered through the speakers. June realized the signal could not tolerate an event without a cost, but it also depended on a single listener's belief. She turned every radio outward and played the bulletin to the entire town. Phones woke. Televisions activated. Thousands of people heard conflicting versions of tomorrow at once. With no single listener able to believe one future completely, the forecast fractured into noise. The on-air sign shattered. June's father aged 16 years in a few seconds and collapsed into her arms. Filez's voice moved from radio to radio, pleading for someone to stay tuned. Mara cut the microphone cable. At sunrise, the tower was only rusted steel. County records now showed that WDLR had closed peacefully in 2006. No collapse, no missing announcer, no experimental relay. June's father remembered years trapped inside broadcasts that apparently had never existed. The tapes in the archive became blank. For 3 weeks, 107.7 carried ordinary static. June began to believe the loop had finally ended. On the 22nd night, a truck driver crossed Weller County during a storm. At 1:07, his radio tuned itself to 107.7. A calm woman read tomorrow's weather, tomorrow's lottery numbers, and a warning about the East Bridge. The driver recognized her voice from a local interview about the missing station. It belonged to June Harrow. At home, June woke with 7 minutes missing from her memory and the taste of copper in her mouth. Her father found a new field meter on the kitchen table. Its needle pointed toward her. Then every silent radio in the house tapped 3 quick, 2 slow, 3 quick, and waited for her to answer. June never found another tower, but the broadcasts continued wherever one person drove alone after midnight. She began recording warnings before they arrived, hoping to dilute the signal with possibilities. Most files contained only static. One captured Filez laughing beneath her voice. Another contained tomorrow's bulletin written in the voice of a listener not yet born. The final file ended with a simple instruction: stay tuned for an important announcement at 1:07. Below it was a list of names from Weller County. June's was crossed out. Her father's was crossed out. The next name belonged to the driver who had heard her first broadcast, and the date beside it was tomorrow.